Okay, cool. So hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for our part one of our two-part media training that we're going to be doing this week. Currently, all attendees are in listen-only mode. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to chat them out. Here's our agenda. We also have time for a Q&A at the end. We can unmute folks too, so actually you'll be able to share your questions live, which is great. So let's get started. So learning objectives today, by the end of today's presentation, you should be able to identify things to consider when creating your message and identify different types of media. And as you can see, we're joined today by Sam Inglot. Sam is over with Progress Michigan. I'm going to let him tell you more about himself, but right now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Sam. Sam, thanks again for joining us today.
Sure thing, Mara. Appreciate you having me. As always, love doing these trainings with the Ecology Center. Mara and I were talking about it, and this is my sixth year. Is that what we? Yes.
That's what we figured out.
Yeah. So this is my my longest running, most consistent media training that I've been doing at Progress Michigan. So. Again, my name is Sam Inglot. I am the Deputy Director at Progress and Engage Michigan. Progress and Engage Michigan are nonprofit, nonpartisan 501c4 and C3 organizations. We act as a communications hub for progressive organizations across the state, and essentially we are a PR firm for folks that align with our values around environmental justice, social justice, economic rights, that sort of thing. And we act as both a progressive advocacy organization and a communications hub. So while a lot of organizations like the Ecology Center, for example, are really focused on a particular set of issues around the environment and health, Progress Michigan, we really will talk about and communicate around anything that fits within our value space, and Ecology Center and the great work that Mara does and the rest of the crew, along with all the fellows, fit right within that wheelhouse. And this is always one of my favorite trainings to give. This year's a little bit different because this one's always online, and it's tough because we can't do our in-person one on Friday, which is always kind of one of my training highlights of the year. But you know, we'll make do and we'll still have a good time. You guys will learn some things. And at the end of this, hopefully you will feel more confident about understanding and engaging with the media and being a confident spokesperson on the important issues that you all work on. Anything else? Do I need to say more?
I think that covers it.
Okay. Is there anything else that you need to get out of the way, or am I good to jump right in?
Nope, you're good to jump in.
All right.
I'll just remind folks, if you have questions, feel free to chat them out or just kind of like raise your hand, and that way we can call on you after the presentation.
Most definitely. All right, let me swap some screens here. All right. Oh, let's see. I'm trying to start my presentation. Bear with me. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. Let's see. Now I need to share my screen. Important information out into the public. And the media can help us do that. They're sort of a piece of that puzzle. But working with the media is also important to help build trust in coverage. And you all are really experts in your fields. So it's important to work with the media and understand how to navigate it so the coverage of what is sometimes these complex issues can be accurate and informative to the general public. But media can also help you build power and influence for your organization. By understanding how to navigate the media, you can understand how to leverage those relationships to assist with the objectives of your organization. And understanding how to navigate the media and having those relationships can help you gather information about your issue as well. So there are two types of media, and really what we're going to be focused on for this presentation as well as the training on Friday is earned media. And that is press hits, news stories that you get through media engagement, press releases, press conferences, media events, calling reporters and pitching them a story. It's the type of coverage that you earn through sweat equity and doing the type of work that we'll be talking about. But then there's also paid media, which is, I think, a very much a growing piece of the media landscape that's also important to understand. And paid media is exactly what it sounds like. It is media that you pay for. So think digital ads, billboards, commercials, radio ads. Those are also things that folks and organizations should consider when trying to get their message out into the public. But again, for this, we're really going to be focusing in on the earned media side of things. So press materials, this is sort of your toolbox when trying to engage with the media. And there are a few basics. You've got your talking points, which we will hit on quite a bit. And we will be using talking points that you all come up with on Friday when we're doing our practice interviews. You've got media advisories, press releases, op-eds, and LTEs, and all of these sort of build into one another. And that's really an important piece of, I think, understanding of media work in general is not doing things ad hoc, but really thinking about the content that you're making building into one another, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time you want to do a press conference or making extra work for yourself. So now we'll go into these in a little bit more detail, and I'll also show some examples of talking points, media advisories, and press releases. So talking points, these are the main message points that are used throughout your campaign or your organization's messaging strategy. They should hit on the best messages of your campaign and include sort of a complete rundown of the story that you want to tell about your issue, your cause, your organization, or an event that you're putting on. And in general, what we like to push for with talking points and messaging in general really is to lean on values and emotional triggers for folks. And this can be especially difficult, I think, within scientific and even sometimes public health messages, because what we know about human beings is that we're not rational. We don't weigh facts, figures, and statistics before making a decision. Often we will make a subjective or emotional decision, based off of our own experiences or what we're seeing right then, and then we'll go and find the facts, figures, and statistics to back up what we already believe. So really speaking to people first and foremost from an emotional standpoint and trying to connect on a values-based level around shared values like opportunity, responsibility to one another, freedom, justice for all, healthy communities. By lifting up those sort of value phrases and points, that's where we can really connect with people, and then we can come in with the facts, figures, and statistics to strengthen our point. And again, I'll show some examples of these in a moment once I've kind of run through the whole media toolkit here. So once you have your talking points, odds are you're probably working on talking points because you are wanting to pitch something to the media, or you have an event coming up, or it's going to be a long-running issue. And when you finally want to get the media's attention, you can use those talking points to create a media advisory, which is essentially an invitation or an RSVP, a save the date for reporters who you're reaching out to about a specific event or action that you might be putting on. And these should be really short and concise. You want to focus on kind of the who, what, when, where, and why of your event, and follow up your media advisories with pitch calls to reporters to ensure they got it, to see if they have any questions about the event, and then you can move on to the actual event from there. So once you've put on a press event or press conference, or potentially, done a conference call to release a set of research, you then want to put out a press release, which we always say should be your, if you were a reporter, this is the story that you would write about it. And really it should be written in a way where a reporter can fully understand the issue, the event, the information that you're putting out there without actually having to attend the event. Obviously, we want to try to get reporters to the things that we're putting on, but in the event they can't, a press release should be able to tell that full story. So include a synopsis of the event, action, information, research, whatever it is you're trying to bring attention to, why it happened, who was there, including quotes from event participants, and any context information like statistics or links to studies, things like that that can help bolster the issue and tell a complete story. And then you have opinion editorials and letters to the editor. These are, I think, a lot of folks have seen these. These are the hot takes, if you will, that we see in a lot of publications. And it's essentially a chance for you to voice your opinion on an issue and help further your message to sway public opinion on it. And when it comes to op-eds and LTEs, I mean, really the main difference is op-eds are typically around like 600 words or so. Letters to the editor are sometimes less than 200. And the big thing with these is when trying to place these with publications, it's important to understand that every single publication is going to be different with how they handle them. And so one thing that I think kind of goes a long way when it comes to working with the media and ensuring that the work that you're doing is reaching the right people and having an impact, pick up the phone. Make a phone call to a publication if you're interested in placing an op-ed or an LTE with them. Figure out who you send it to, sort of what the limitations are, when and where it might be placed, because every publication is different. And don't rely on just a quick Google search to find out where to send things, because I'm going to tell you right now, some of those emails where they tell you, send it to, opinion@freep.com, for the Detroit Free Press. Odds are that just goes into a black hole. And that's, I think, the case with a lot of attempts at media relations without actually building relationships, is that you don't get the quite exact right information, or you get information that's outdated. So when engaging with the media, pick up the phone, send a personal email, find out what the procedures are in order to make sure your information, your op-eds, your media advisors, your press releases are actually reaching the folks that they're intended for. So now I will show a few examples of what I just talked about. So here's an example of a set of talking points. These are from, I want to say, the first time I was involved anyway with the Earned Paid Sick Time campaign. And these were sort of just our top line messages that we wanted to make sure were front and center with the campaign, on our press materials, in our messages that people were delivering at press events, in op-eds, in any paid media. And it's important to kind of have these housed in one place, and so folks can access it, and people on your team don't need to reinvent the wheel every time they need to put together a fact sheet or work on a media advisory or prep for an interview. And this really should be considered as well, I would say, a living document that can be changed based on the types of folks that are delivering this message. And really, talking points should be dependent on the messenger. At Progress Michigan, one of the things that we do, how we handle talking points for media events, some folks will just write a script for people and say, here's what you're saying, read this, and then you're done. The process that we go through, and I think that a lot of organizations should do this, is have a conversation with somebody. If I am, if there's a working mom, a single mother, something like that, that I was working with on a paid sick time campaign, I would have a conversation with her about the issue. I would take notes throughout. and I would try to capture both sort of her voice and cadence as well as her perspective, because a mom working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet is going to come at this issue of paid sick time very differently than an economic researcher would. And the talking points should reflect the person's lived experience, so it's authentic and real, and they feel confident about saying the messages that they've lined up with you to use. And I think that's it on talking points. And I think we might talk about at the end some things that you can do to prepare for our training on Friday as it relates to elevator pitches, which is sort of a take on talking points that will be helpful for Friday. And then here is a media advisory. As you can see, it's very short. It basically hits on, like I said, the 5 W's, if you will. On Wednesday, this is from 2015, in front of the State Capitol building, the Time to Care Coalition will kick off signature gathering campaign to put earned paid sick time on the ballot in 2016. Really simple, short and to the point. It doesn't necessarily include all of your messages. It is just a save the date for the media. We usually encourage folks not to put too much information or quotes. I don't think we ever really put quotes in media advisories, because that can be a disincentive to reporters in the media to actually show up for your event. Hold on, I need to let my cat in. Sorry. All day. It's all day. So this is a media advisory, and what we tell folks is you should send this out the day before your event, the morning of. All right, go ahead. And then follow up with pitch calls, because oftentimes if you send, if you're sending this to a local TV station, you don't know that they necessarily read the email. So it's always good to do a follow up. And now I'm realizing that the stuff I'm showing you is from different dates, but it's all around the same issue because we've been working on this one for a while. So this is from same issue with earned paid sick time. And this is a press release about an event that was held at the Capitol. And as you can see, it is much longer than the media advisory. If you were to read through this, you would see that it probably includes a lot of the talking points that were in the first document. It features quotes from key folks at the event. It includes links and data that can help back up some of the more emotional and values-based statements that we want to try to lean in on issues like this. And a reporter could look at this and understand the ins and outs of what the campaign is pushing for, what the event was about, and would have relevant quotes to be able to use for writing their story. So that's the examples I have of press materials. Do we have, Mara, are there any questions or anything yet about press materials?
Doesn't look like it, but folks, if you have any, feel free to share them.
All right. I think this is kind of a, I'm going to skip this one for now. I think that's kind of an errant slide there. So let's talk about the elevator pitch. So there is, we live in a very static-filled environment when it comes to the media. And if you're trying to get attention for your issue, you are competing against other things for people's attention. And so it's important to sort of be able to talk about your issue as succinctly and effectively as possible. And that's where the elevator pitch sort of comes into play. The sort of anecdote that we use for this is, you get into an elevator with somebody else on the first floor. Let's see, now the cat wants out. Yeah. So you get into an elevator with somebody on the first floor. You're heading up to the third floor. They're going to the second floor. And when you step into the elevator with somebody, they say, hey, what are you heading up to the third floor for? you should be able to tell them in the time that it takes to get up to their floor, why you're going up there, why it matters, and what can be done about it. And say it in such a compelling way that they want to skip their floor and go up to the third floor with you. So that's sort of how we frame what an effective elevator pitch is. And it's really kind of like the go-to mantra that you should have for when talking about your campaign or your issue. It should be short, concise, and hit on the best messages of your campaign. And really that, we'll talk about this more on Friday, but short, concise statements really are your best friend, because that actually gives you more control over your voice when dealing with the media. Because if anybody has ever, read a news story or seen one on TV, you would know that, they don't give people unlimited amounts of time to talk about their issue. So it's important to be able to really frame the key aspects of your issue within a short, punchy statement, no more than a couple of sentences, really, that can try to encapsulate as best as possible the goals of your issue, your campaign, your organization. And if you're looking for a way to kind of think about it, this is a concept that I've been referring to as like the message trident, because it has 3 prongs to it that can then lead to a larger sort of pieces of information. So there's really 3 things that you want to try to convey within an elevator pitch. What is happening? Why does it matter? And what can be done about it? And by doing that, we're conveying a piece of information, some values, and action. So again, just going off of the earned paid sick time piece of this from before, let's say we're at one of those events at the Capitol. We're here today to push for earned paid sick time legislation because everybody gets sick, but not everyone has the opportunity to take care of themselves and their family without risking financial ruin. That is why it's important for legislators to pass House Bill 1234, so everyone in the state of Michigan has the opportunity to earn paid sick time. So there I said, this is why we're here today. We're here talking about earned paid sick time, conveyed a piece of information. Why does it matter? Because everyone gets sick. Not everyone has the opportunity to get better without risking financial ruin. And what can be done about it? They can pass House Bill, Senate Bill 1234. So I think this is a pretty effective way of communicating in general around our issues, especially when dealing with the media. And an elevator pitch is great because, one, it gives you a really great thing that you can practice on a regular basis. And it's also a good bookend to both press events as well as like interviews. You can lead with your elevator pitch and you can end with your elevator pitch. That way, the beginning and end of the entire event is really kind of focused on the main key message, concisely packaged together, that you want to put out there for your issue, event, or organization. Interviews. Now, we will be talking a lot about interviews come Friday, and we will talk about a lot of these things, I think, a little bit more in depth with some practice and more Q&A. But I'll just hit on a few of these things now so you can sort of be in the right mindset coming into Friday. So when it comes to interviews, rule number 1 is to not engage with the media unless you have permission from your campaign or organization to do so. The last thing that you want to do is do an interview without permission, and then a story gets written and you get in trouble. Just like with most things in organizations, it's important to have processes, accountability, so everyone is on the same page and marching in the same direction. But also with interviews, you want to become a reporter yourself. Ask questions about the interview format, the angle that the reporter's taking, who else they might be talking to. And we'll get into some details on Friday about what the answers to some of those questions that you ask, how those can affect the interview, as well as some of the strategies that you might want to use to be able to prep or execute those interviews effectively. Also, don't pretend to be an expert on a topic where you're not, and feel free to say, I don't know. because the last thing that you want to do is start fudging some answers, or maybe talking about something that is potentially off message, and that can lead to a lot of problems as well. Like I said before, keep your comments short and concise. Will give you much better control of your message, and ensure that what is being reported is what you want to be reported. And then, if an interview is pre-recorded, feel free to start over if you screw up. I have yet to meet a reporter who has said, because I've bungled an answer or said it not as eloquently as I would have liked. I have yet to run into a reporter who hasn't allowed me to start over, because at the end of the day, they want a good soundbite, they want a good clip, and they also want to make sure that the message that you're putting out there is reflective of your organization. But it's also incumbent upon you to make sure that that's happening as well. And then never go off the record. It sounds, kind of like, sexy and mysterious. So we're going to go off the record. This is, like Watergate or House of Cards or whatever. There's not really a reason to go off the record. It's just better to stay on message, and especially because the terms of going off the record need to be agreed to beforehand, and you really should have an unbridled level of trust with a reporter that whatever you say off the record, it won't actually go on the record. So it's just better to avoid it in general. So if a reporter reaches out to you, find out their deadline, because that will give you a little bit of time maybe to do some prep. If they don't need a quote right there and then, you can take a couple of minutes to go over your talking points or practice with some of the techniques that we'll talk about on Friday. And you don't always have to do a interview. I mean, again, like I said, Progress Michigan, we work on so many different issues that, and we're sort of seen as just a general progressive organization that, feels pretty comfortable weighing in on a lot of issues. I've had reporters call me for some really weird interview requests, and I've declined a lot of them because, understanding the statistics about how many people have moved in and out of the state in the past 2 years is not really something that, that's an actual example of an interview request that I got, was weighing in on a study of population shifts within Michigan. And it just really wasn't something that fit within our wheelhouse necessarily. If you reach out to a reporter, make sure your issue is timely or relevant, and explore the stories that they've written before to see maybe how it could tie in. If there's a potential follow-up or an angle that maybe they haven't considered, or if you just know that it's a particular topic that this reporter likes to work on. Those can all be things that you should consider when reaching out to various reporters. And then know your issue inside and out. If you are reaching out, or at least be able to, if you are making a pitch call for an event, be able to sell that event to reporters, why they should show up. So again, understanding the aspects of your media advisory and being able to, have a conversation with somebody and say, this is why you should care about this issue, why your readers would care, and why I think you should show up. And then also localize your issue. Make it so it is relevant to the people that will read that publication, to the audience that reporter is writing stories for. I think there have been, I think, some large cases where, folks who do the type of work that we all do have sort of gotten lost in way too big of the picture with large facts and statistics, or things that seem so big and far away that it doesn't resonate with people. And I think we can probably talk about that a little bit more on Friday as well, how to make sure that you are, your messages are speaking to that emotional decision-making part of people's brains. And really the best way to reach those people is, this is how your life will be impacted. And then for TV, and we'll talk about this more on Friday as well, think of visual elements, right? Because we can have the best messaging and things like that, but if you really want your message to pop, if you want your event to go off well and have, have it create the splash that you want it to, having some visual elements to sort of spice it up, whether that's an interesting backdrop, a large prop, or just a different format entirely to the event that you're putting on. So again, here's the, the press event. So again, this is sort of rehashing some of what we already talked about. Pitch calls are essential. Make sure that media advisory gets to reporters and follow up. And one thing as well is if your organization does not have a press list, because that's one question that I get quite a bit is how do you find these folks, or where can you get a press list from? I'm going to tell you right now, there are services that you can pay for that will build a press list for you. But in my experience, and I've been doing, I was a reporter before I was at Progress Michigan. I've been with Progress Michigan for August will be 7 years. Those lists that you pay for, I don't think are very good. And there's a lot of dead emails, or they're missing people. And one of the best things that you can do for your organization is make your own press list. It can take a little bit of work, but it's a great way to build relationships with reporters, because you have to pick up the phone, make calls, send personal emails, find out the best place to send things. But it will pay off, because you will know, okay, I talked to Bob over at the Detroit Free Press. This is the email. I have Bob's email. I know this is going to get to him. But still, the pitch calls are important, because I'm going to tell you this too. Reporters are inundated with press releases and media advisories. Somewhere out there in the world, my old reporter email is connected somewhere to some press release list that forwards to my personal Gmail account. So I get all sorts of press releases and media advisories and pitch emails. My inbox is flooded with them, and I haven't been a reporter for nearly a decade. So you can only imagine what reporters who are active are sort of facing on a daily basis as far as their inboxes go. That's why picking up the phone is a really important piece of this. This is just sort of more on, I think, you can practice pitch calls. That's a really, because again, making cold calls can be a little bit nerve-wracking at times, but the more that you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. And really, when it comes to dealing with the media, I think some people, there's kind of two problems I see. They're either like too buttoned up, like they're too stiff, and they're forgetting that reporters are people too, and they have names and you can have conversations with them. But then there's also times when people are a little too lax, and then you sort of forget, your role in this work, or you go off message, and that's when problems can happen. And there's a happy medium between a kind of a professional, friendly relationship that can be fostered with reporters. So they know what you're about, how they operate at their publication, and it can be sort of a two-way relationship and not so transactional to where, the only time you're calling this reporter or reaching out to them is when you want them to write something. Sometimes you can, just forward them things. Hey, I saw the story, thought it might, influence your coverage later on, or here's this study, just wanted to make sure you saw it. One of the things I'll even do sometimes is, and granted, I know a lot of these reporters from my reporting days, but I'll say, hey, spotted a typo in your story there. Just wanted to point that out for you. So again, it's about that balance of having a friendly professional relationship with the media that can go a long way in making sure you're getting the type of coverage that you want. And I think that's that. And then now I'll talk social media. Now we do full trainings on social media. Obviously it's constantly changing all the time. And, but I'm going to just kind of hit on a few key points, because I also find, oddly enough, that usually when we do the in-person trainings, social media is one of the areas where we get the most questions. And, I'm very flexible. So on Friday, today, if you have questions about any of the things that I've hit on, feel free to, ask them, because I want to make sure that folks feel, are getting the most out of this training and are having their questions answered as best I can. So first, one disclaimer about social media is that if you're going to align yourself with an organization, a campaign, a cause, a candidate on your personal profile, make sure that you are representing yourself accordingly. Because social media is always on the record. And I remember one of the first things I would always do before I would interview anyone was I would check out their social media. I would see, what they were all about. And we've seen time and time again, especially lately, that people are being held accountable for what they're doing on their social media. So if you're listing your employer, know that reporters and other folks will, look at what you're posting and could take that to your employer, or it could reflect on your employer or your organization or anything like that. So just mind your P's and Q's, and make sure that what you're posting won't do any harm to your organization or, make you look foolish or anything like that. And I think that's something that we're all seeing right now in the media, with people getting called out for bad things that they've posted. And I delete way more than I post. So just be cognizant about what you're putting on social media. But when it comes to actually like running social media for your organization, do what works for your organization. Because you've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all sorts of different things. You do not need to do everything. Do what works for your organization. So if you have some people who are great at Facebook, awesome. Focus on Facebook. And you have no idea what to do with Twitter, feel free to dabble in it, but don't, break your back thinking you have to be on Twitter. It can be, use social media that you're comfortable with, that you're, or social media formats that your organization can utilize effectively. Don't feel like you have to do everything, but always be willing to be flexible and see about learning and growing with how you can use different social media platforms. One great thing about social media, and this is true, especially with earned media, press conferences, protests, releasing research reports, those different types of earned media. Sometimes there will be a dud. Sometimes you will put in all this work and no media shows up. It happens. Sometimes you just get skunked, because, newsrooms are short on staff right now. We're competing for a lot of attention. And there are things that you can do to try to mitigate you getting no coverage, not planning things when that there's another big event or there's a big committee hearing or a big vote coming up, trying to find places where you're not in competition with other efforts to get media engagement and trying to find those gaps. But sometimes you won't get press to show up. But that is where social media can help you create your own media and make it so all the work that you did for the earned media event don't go to waste. So if you're doing a press conference and no media shows up, that's fine. Have somebody pop on Facebook Live and record the press conference as if it were, as if there were a crowd of people behind the camera, just, asking questions and enthralled by what the speakers are saying. And then that can go on your Facebook. Take pictures of the event and pull some quotes from the press release and create a graphic for them to share on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. Social media is a way for you to amplify the work that you're already doing. And whether reporters show up or not, there should be some sort of social media component in your earned media plan, because otherwise you're just sort of missing a key audience with where folks are at. Again, consider yourself a representative of the campaign organization if you're putting your name on there, because reporters will do that, and social media is always on the record. So just, mind your P's and Q's there. And that was it from my portion here. Mara, are there any questions? I would love to answer some questions. I would love to talk more if folks would have me. And then just the one thing I would say too is if anyone has questions about stuff before our training on Friday, there's my email. Feel free to shoot me a message, or if you want, to send Mara an email and have her ping me, that works too. I want to make sure folks feel ready and prepared for a fun time on Friday.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, Sam, so what we'll be doing is after today's webinar is closed, I'll be posting the recording along with all the materials, and I'll include Sam's contact info in case there are specific questions you have for him. But Sam, to kick us off, you mentioned at the beginning that there's Progress Michigan and that there's Engage Michigan, and one does C4 work and one does C3.
Yes.
Can you kind of explain what the difference between the two are?
Oh, yeah, I can try. This is where it's important, again, to have, especially with messaging, because the words that you use in your communications, the nonprofit designation that you have between C3 and C4 are very different. And I would say the way that Progress Michigan really kind of approaches it is Progress Michigan is our C4, which sort of does aggressive accountability work. So we call out lawmakers and, powerful business interests and things like that, to try to hold them accountable. And then our Engage Michigan side is much more education focused and lifting up organizations rather than being the voice on an issue. And as far as my understanding, and this is why we have an executive director and a really good attorney as well to help me with all of this, but legally speaking, a C4 can do all the things a C3 does, but a C3 cannot necessarily do all the things a C4 does. Yes, C4 can do C3, C3 cannot do C4. And there are, I don't even know how many different nonprofit designations there are, but those will impact greatly, and especially if you're getting grants and things like that, the type of money that is will dictate the type of messages and the types of actions that you can do with that grant funding. So that's why it's important to write things down and here are our talking points for this grant funded project. This is a C3 funded project, let's say. Here is our campaign plan. Here are our messages. And then make sure that goes through the proper vetting so that you're not doing anything that would jeopardize that grant funding or get you in trouble. It can be a delicate balance. There can be some landmines you need to avoid, but it's important that folks understand that so that nobody gets in trouble and things can go smoothly and you can, fulfill the grant, execute it, and then hopefully get that grant funding again the next time it comes around.
Yeah, good point. And just so folks know, all of the work that the Ecology Center does falls under C3. So like Sam said, that means that we don't have all of the same plethora of options as C4 work. But when it comes to our work, there aren't as many differences. It really comes down to endorsements. So we are not, as an organization, going to be endorsing any particular candidate. So for example, when we're doing candidate education work this summer with all of you, meeting with candidates, we're not going to be endorsing anyone, but we will, maybe be saying things like, get out and vote. Don't forget to vote. Make sure that, when you're voting, you're taking into consideration the environment, or health is really important, that sort of thing. And then when it comes to working with legislators, a lot of the times it can be very specific and around education of a legislator or telling them how to vote. And like Sam said, that kind of comes down to our grants. So for example, sometimes when I'm going to speak with legislators, I know if I'm there for a particular issue, it falls under a certain grant, that is only education. So just a little more, kind of like a real world example, I guess. Sam, another question that I've been getting a lot from people recently is, because of the current state of affairs and how quickly everything is changing and moving, and there's a lot of important information and there's a lot of action that's happening right now, how do you kind of make sure that you're still being able to get your own messaging out or amplifying it? And are there certain times when it's best to kind of chime in on things and sit back on others for the time being?
Yeah.
It's a big question, I know.
It is a big question. And that's something, that's a lot of folks are grappling with that right now. And, it is, and without getting into too many details or anything, it's an election year. There's a lot of money being spent. There are programs that have been in the works, for the past, roughly year and a half that are now being executed, with the eye towards November. But given a lot of what has happened, a lot of people have just said, this is not timely. This would come off as insensitive. This is not what people are paying attention to right now. And that's, I think, a strategic consideration for any organization to make. I can't tell you, everything became about COVID, right? Once that hit, everything did. And I think we're kind of seeing that along the same side as racial justice right now. And there are strategic considerations to make around our issues and communicating publicly around it. We obviously do not want to be tone deaf around what's happening. We don't want to be insensitive. And also, we don't want to waste our time. Obviously, the issues that the Ecology Center and a bunch of different groups that Progress Mission works with, are working on extremely important issues that impact people's lives every single day. However, if people are all looking over here, it might be a little hard to get people's attention back over here. So you might want to, again, think about, okay, we won't do this press conference now, we'll hold off on it, or is there a way for us to rework this op-ed, or this column that we're trying to place, around this issue, because intersectionality is important with so many different issues, public health, racial justice, public health, global pandemic, obviously. But these things are often very interconnected. And if you have a solid base of messaging and understanding your issue inside and out, there are ways that you can get creative to show people the links between what everyone is paying attention to and the issue that you're always talking about. So every organization is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different, but you do want to sort of pay attention to what is happening in the world so you don't come off as tone deaf, so you don't tick people off, and so you don't waste your time. Because the last thing you want to do is put all this work into something, put out into the world, and then get like no return back on all of that. If that does happen, then just recalibrate. Think about how you can repackage it a different way going forward, or maybe how you can connect it to some issues that folks are talking about. And then always, one thing as well, is always be thinking long term. So much of our work is focused in cycles or committee meetings or funding. And one thing that we always try to really push with at Progress Michigan is long-term power building around these issues, because issues of public health, of toxic chemicals, of PFAS, they are not going to be solved in 1 year, in one election cycle, in one legislature. And so always be thinking about the long-term building that you're doing, and keeping that in mind, that it's cliche, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. There are times you may have to sprint to get to the marathon, but just be thinking about the current climate of what people are talking about, what people are paying attention to, and keep that in mind, because even in normal days, we're competing for people's attention. But in an environment where people are inundated with a certain important message, you want to keep that in mind as well. Oh, I think you're on mute, Mara. Mara, I think you're on mute.
I am. I'm just talking to myself over here. Thank you. So I'm actually going to share my screen because we haven't got any questions about this yet, Sam, but I have a feeling they will come up since it's something that we're going to be discussing on Friday, is about elevator pitches and kind of what fellows should have prepared for Friday. You kind of mentioned it already, but I figured we could kind of maybe elaborate that on a bit more.
Yep, no, I'm glad you brought that up. So on Friday, we'll be doing, again, I'll probably rehash some of this, probably go into a little bit more detail. We'll, keep it loose and flexible so people can ask questions as we're going. So folks feel like they're completely, getting the answers to the questions and absorbing the information. But what would be helpful? Here's your kind of homework, if you will. Think about an issue that you are working on, that you're passionate about, that you would like to use for interview practice. And I think there are kind of two things that you can bring to the table. One is an elevator pitch, which I think Mara has some good info on here. And write it down. Write it down, put it on some paper, and bring that with you. So again, an elevator pitch should be a nice, short, concise statement that explains what your issue is, why it matters, and what can be done about it. Again, thinking of the message Trident, those three key things: information, values, and action. And then read it out loud as you're working on it. Between now and Friday, write it out, read it out loud. Read it to somebody else, see if it makes sense, right? That way you can do some fine tuning between now and Friday as well. And then also half a dozen talking points or so. Key messages that you think that build on or are included in your elevator pitch that you can use to flesh out more of a conversation, that you can lean on if asked follow-up questions about your elevator pitch. These can include facts, figures, and statistics, but they should also include, again, thinking about that emotional, values-based way that we want to be speaking to people about our issues to really hook them in, is going to be key. So again, values concepts: freedom, responsibility to one another, healthy communities, strong families. Think about those kind of emotional, squishy, feely type things that can be used for a lot of different issues, but can obviously be used for talking about PFAS, lead, toxic chemicals. And I think if you come prepared with an elevator pitch and some talking points, that will be good. And one thing that I didn't mention: personal stories go a long way within media and communications work. So if there is an anecdote, if there is some way that you or someone that you know or love has been affected by these issues, those are things that resonate with people. And so think about ways that you can maybe break those down into some short messages or utilize those within your elevator pitch. There is, I think it was George Lakoff who said, "No one ever marched on Washington because of a pie chart." So, keep that in mind when, writing your talking points. I'll talk about this a little bit more on Friday. But, no one ever came home and said, "Oh my gosh, honey, you'll never believe this statistic I heard." People don't talk about, the facts, figures, and things like that they necessarily encountered during their day. They'll tell you about the crazy story that they saw, or the emotional video, the thing that spoke to them. The facts, figures, and statistics are good. They can help us back up what we're saying, and those definitely have a key place. But we really want to hit on the emotional, values-based, and personal storytelling to get our message out there, because empathy is how you get people to act. A good message. Now I'm kind of going into other things, but that's fine. It all builds on each other. A good message does two things. It captures and keeps somebody's attention, and it leads to a desired action. And to capture and keep somebody's attention, you want to appeal to their emotions. You want to make them feel something versus thinking about something. Once you've gotten somebody to feel something, then you can come in with those facts, those statistics to help continue to build that connection to the issue. But then you also want to say what can be done about it, because we don't just want to come out and say everything's terrible. All right, bye. We want to say everything's terrible, and here's what we can do about it. It doesn't have to be this way. So that's an important thing to remember. Capture and keep somebody's attention, lead to a desired action. And that's where the elevator pitch comes in, because that concept is packaged right in there. And then that can also help you develop, again, half a dozen talking points or so, because you do not need a thesis statement when it comes to necessarily talking about these issues. You can feel free to pull from a thesis statement, but our interviews and things like that are going to be very short, truncated interactions with the media. Your comments in a news story are going to be very short, truncated comments. So repetition ain't a bad thing. Like I said, if you begin and end saying the exact same thing, that's great, because then that's two opportunities for that to get into the story. And that also shows the media, this is what we're here about. So a couple things to consider there.
Cool. Thanks for all that. And like Sam mentioned, having talking points. So I will be sharing with all of you after this when I send out the webinar materials, some talking points that we already have. And Sam mentioned some of the issue areas. So you'll see one that's specifically around air quality and climate and energy. We also have one that's specifically around PFAS, and we also have one for lead. Also on the webpage, we do also have the supplemental materials. So if there's other things you want to pull from, or if there's another issue that you're working on right now or really has just been at the forefront of your mind, you can also choose from those. But Sam mentioned kind of like having that emotional story to share. That's also really important when you're speaking with legislators. So back when Alexis did the Advocacy 101 training, she talked about that a lot. So also think about ways in which that, you can take this elevator pitch and not just use it for if you're being interviewed, but also when you're going to be speaking with legislators and candidates in the summer and into the fall. It's also a great kind of way to package your messaging. And then you, like Sam said, if you're, repetitive and you say something more than once, that's great because it also helps other people remember. But kind of having that in the back of your mind will also be really helpful when you're meeting with decision makers too.
As well as regular people, like just getting folks to care about an issue. If you can get the guy at the bus stop to care about, PFAS or chemical contaminants, guess what? You'll probably have a pretty good shot at, influencing lawmakers and decision makers as well. So yeah, these can have, these are skills that can help in a wide variety of areas. Communicate, because people are people, and we know how people react to certain pieces of information. We know the best ways to try to connect with people. And that's true in politics and public policy. It's true in corporate marketing as well. The power of story, the power of emotion, the power of speaking to people on that decision-making level where you're having people feel something versus just thinking about it.
Great. And I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, so we'll just move on to some reminders for Friday. So our next meeting, like Sam mentioned before, we'll be doing media training part 2. This will be more of an interactive training done virtually. So it should be exciting. It's the first time we're doing it this way, but I think we're in for a good time. So we'll be meeting via Zoom meeting, not how we've been doing Zoom webinars. So I've sent around the link before. I'm also going to chat it out to everyone right now. I'll also include it in the follow-up email that I'll be sending out with all the media training materials. And I think I'm just going to send everyone a calendar invite too, because sometimes that's just easiest, because that way you have access to all the information about the Zoom meeting. So we'll be starting at 10 a.m. Sam will be joining us as well. So the big things for folks are to be on the lookout for an email later this afternoon. It will include this recording, along with the elevator pitches and talking point examples that we have for all of you to help you kind of use as the guide to creating your own elevator pitches. And then it'll also all be on the website, so I'll include that link as well, so you can easily access it in a couple different ways. And I think that's everything for today. If there aren't any other questions, Sam, is there anything else that you wanted to share with everyone before we wrap up today?
No, I don't think so. And if people do have like questions or specific things that they want to learn on Friday as it relates to any of the things that we've talked about, because again, I want to be super flexible, and I get one chance a year with the Ecology Center, so I want to make sure I, help people out as much as I can. So whether it's social media, media relations, press materials, interview techniques, questions in general about, communications and messaging, feel free to shoot those questions tomorrow, send them to me. That way I can, make sure that we're prepared and everyone's getting the most out of this training, because I know your time's valuable. Sitting on a computer, staring at, this ugly mug, it's got to have some payoff, right? So I want to make sure folks are getting the most out of it.
Great, perfect. Well, Sam, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm really excited for Friday. Hopefully all of our fellows are as well. So big thank you to you. Thanks to all the fellows for hopping on today. We'll be in touch later this afternoon, and then we'll see all of your faces on Friday. So with that, everyone enjoy their afternoon and take care.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe out there.